Welcome to the Wednesday, March 22nd edition of the PFF Forecast. It's a great show. We've got rumors about which quarterback is going first overall. We're going to talk about that. Is Josh McCown playing horse or pig with CJ Stroud? Or are they going to actually play one-on-one? We're going to dig into the really important details here. We're going to talk about some draft props that we like. Arjun's done some really cool research around GM tendencies that we're going to get into. Brad has got some news about DeAndre Hopkins. We're going to talk about the Elijah Moore deal to the Jets, another big move for the Jets. It's going to be great to see Zach Wilson throwing to people other than Elijah Moore this year. It's going to be just fantastic. So it's a great show. Let's ride. All right, fellas, we have Arjun reporting live from the only log cabin in Southern California. So he's in the same state as me, although it's a big state, so it feels like kind of far away. And Brad, you're breaking news from what appears to be a dimly lit man cave.
I don't get why it's always so dark in here, but yes, that is accurate.
Do you have any I feel like you should have a deer head or like a boar's head somewhere on one of those walls, Arjun?
Yeah, but instead I actually have posters of rock music. So kind of a similar vein, like a badass vein, but yeah, we're not.
Who is that? I can't quite make it out.
That's Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, and then the one next to it is Eagles and Fleetwood Mac. So very cultured family I come from.
Very, very quality. Eagles, I think Hotel California might be my favorite song of all time.
I respect that. Take It Easy. A lyric from Take It Easy was my senior yearbook quote, because I guess I thought I was
Really?
born in 1962. So, good vibe. Those are very different vibes, though. That's like some hard rock versus some yacht rock vibes going on there.
Yeah, the culture is strong here on the PFF Forecast. Welcome to everybody that's hanging out with us. If you have not joined the conversation on the Printing Press, the PFF Forecast Discord, make sure you get involved because it is draft prop season. Things change very quickly, and that's probably the place where you can most, kind of quickly react. We talked about the Panthers moving up to number one before they did. A lot of people in the Discord got them at 370, 4-1 to pick first. And of course, they were heavily manned. They were armed to the gills at the Panthers pro day today. The Ohio State pro day today. They had 14 people. It was the most of any team. There's a clip that has gone viral of quarterback coach Josh McCown telling CJ Stroud that they can find a court when he moves to Carolina, moves to Charlotte, which of course has everyone thinking that it guarantees the first pick. So Brad, is this all smoke or is there some fire here?
There's so much smoke going on now, too, because leading up to this pro day, we had Daniel Jeremiah and Mel Kiper, two of the bigger names in the mock draft space, both put Bryce Young first overall in their most recent mocks from this past week. There was, I think, a couple quotes going around from other guys as well. We then had Thomas Davis, the Panthers legend, who once had a Frankenstein arm in the Super Bowl. If you don't remember who that is, who was saying he thinks they're going to take Anthony Richardson. So there's a lot of smoke going on. I'll tell you this, even if it was smoke or even if it was real, McCown getting caught on the hot mic, I don't think he's going to go over super well on their plane ride, by the way, to go meet with Bryce Young for a nice dinner before his pro day tomorrow. So they're courting everyone at this point. I think you probably don't want to read too much into it, but it's not a throwaway line when you're saying when you live in Charlotte next year. It means something.
What do you think, Arjun?
Yeah, no, I'm with Brad. It was kind of weird seeing the McCown Stroud clip and hearing him say, like, if you come to Charlotte, we could play horse or something. But I don't know. I think the Stroud thing is there's just a lot of smoke around it. Young kind of got a lot of backing the past couple of days. Even I think yesterday, Tuesday, Stroud was only minus 150 to be the first quarterback selected on FanDuel. Now he's already back up to minus 320. So it's a very, very liquid market. And I'm sure like if Young throws well tomorrow, which he probably will, and tests well, then his odds will go back up. But right now it just seems like whoever's being talked about the most on Twitter is the player that's going to be the most bet in some of these markets, which obviously are super liquid, but I would still think that Stroud is the favorite to be selected by the Panthers.
It's so interesting because I was trying to think this through. Okay. Any coach that has been to pro days before is not going to give anything away, right? They know that everything is being videotaped. There was a clip of someone videotaping a video camera to get a clip of CJ Stroud with Frank Reich in the background. Incredible. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. And but what's interesting is Josh McCown is not a like seasoned vet of NFL coaching. And so this is where I actually think that it's not out of the realm of possible. Any other coach, this is completely fabricated. It's baloney. Like they're just throwing the media for a complete wrench. This one, I think, could be somewhat, there could be something to it. Josh McCown, I don't know if anyone's seen these clips, is a basketball player. So like him talking about playing basketball with CJ Stroud, I think is a natural conversation that they could be having. They've certainly talked before. And Josh McCown, also remember the history here is he compared CJ Stroud to Joe Burrow. Okay. So he likes the guy. Like maybe they don't pick him number one. Maybe they pick Bryce Young. I know Josh McCown likes CJ Stroud, or you're not saying that on tape. And what do you do if you are enamored with a prospect? You want them to come to your team. You want them to feel at home. You want them to be excited about coming. You are going to engage in like all these kind of other things that are going to make the experience great. So I actually, as banana land as it sounds, I think there could be some fire behind this. Of course, they're going to do the due diligence across all the quarterbacks. And so I think the opportunity here from a betting standpoint is if you do, as Brad has already, think there is a decent chance that Bryce Young could go number one. Get him at 3-1 now. As Arjun said, it's going to go down tomorrow because he's going to throw well. And here's the thing. If Josh McCown goes to Bryce Young and says something like, hey, maybe we'll find a court in Charlotte, then you know he's full of it. He's playing everybody. And you can go and act accordingly. But yeah, that's I think the interesting piece here is because Frank Reich seasoned bet, but Josh McCown is not. I think we can read into that a little bit.
No, it's a great point. It's a great point. Like you said, he's brand new to this role. He honestly probably views himself as like a vet mentor teammate in his mind still, as opposed to an actual quarterback's coach. And yeah, now, like I've been saying over and over again, bet Bryce Young right this second. He probably will now, even if it's genuine or not. He'll probably make sure a hot mic catches him saying something tomorrow just to obfuscate the entire situation.
I legitimately would be surprised if Frank was like, yo, buddy, play bocce ball with Bryce Young tomorrow. Okay. Like we need to figure this one out. So let me ask you this. Okay. So, what we've talked about the Texans and what they would do. So let's say that the Panthers do stay at 1 and pick Bryce Young. CJ Stroud, is he going at number 2, or is that like, we've talked about the agent thing with CJ Stroud's agent being Deshaun Watson's agent, the history there, obviously in Houston. Is that actually a possibility?
So look, I don't think that like that alone would just like make it not a possibility, but even some bigger names in this space kind of said that. I think I mentioned that last show, basically alluded to it the other day, which I'm sure didn't go over particularly well. So look, I don't think they're going to not do it just because of that, but I think it's why we saw Carolina come out and say, like, we're willing to trade all those things. They're probably trying to buy, some fear and some panic from Houston. Maybe they go Anthony Richardson. So maybe it's also an angle of like, you can almost have a correlated bet where if there are the 1, 2, 3s and stuff like that, which eventually do come out, if you think Young goes first, maybe then you either bet on a Richardson second, or in your mind you say, okay, maybe Houston trades down now, and so then it's like, okay, who would the X team that I think is going to trade up? Who do they like? Like you could get kind of freaky with it a little bit, because it is part of it, and it is possible it influences what happens at 2.
Right now, so the markets that are up there. I'm curious, Arjun, how you would play this. So number 2 overall pick right now, Bryce Young is -180. Stroud is +210. Richardson is 14-1, as is Levis. Anderson is 18-1. Tyree Wilson is 50-1. And Jalen Carter has sunk beneath the list of players that are shown here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's really smart to bet on a non-quarterback. I think like D'Amico and Caserio, like they need to get their franchise guy. Like it's not like Caserio has more time that he can spend just waiting for a franchise guy. Like he can't just wait for Caleb Williams. Like we just don't know if he's going to be around if he doesn't draft a franchise guy. Like yeah, he has to get someone. So if you really think that Young is number 1 and like you have a strong conviction about that, I do agree that it's probably not likely that Stroud goes number 2 if you think the Texans stay put, which I think they will. And so you're probably better off betting on one of Richardson and Levis. And, between them, I think Richardson is probably QB3 in most teams' eyes, but given how Bobby Slowick's offense is going to be, where it's going to be a lot of open guys, like he might want to get the more polished passer, which in this case would be Levis. You could find opportunities to get guys at some of these longer, like 14-1 odds. But I do think that if Stroud is on the board for the Texans, he won't be the pick for them.
It's an interesting point about Slowick and Ryans, though. So Bobby Slowick, PFF alum, who is now offensive coordinator of the Houston Texans. That's why I have my Texans futures tickets locked and loaded. Kyle Shanahan is a few years removed from trading the whole farm for Trey Lance. Now, that has not worked out thus far, but that process is the reason, because the process was bad. Like, I got to assume that he and Bobby and many other people in the organization were excited about what they could do from an offensive perspective. And so I don't know. It's interesting. I tend to agree with you, and especially coming into your first role, you may kind of want to take someone who, I don't know, you feel can execute the offense, as kind of stupid as that sounds. But like, I think there could also be a component of this, which is like, hey, we can implement so much cool running components from the quarterback position that no one's going to be ready for, that's going to throw people for a loop, that we can do with Anthony Richardson. And by the way, we don't need, Tom Brady back there, because we're going to generate so many open throws with this guy. Like, I just need him to make that one read that I tell him to look out for. It's the Jimmy G playbook.
I think it's totally legitimate. It does just kind of change everything you can do. And I also think, in a weird way with the Niners approach, I guess not with Carolina because they went to 1, but with more of the steam of them maybe moving down, quarterback evaluation is impossible. The smartest people ever at doing it are still like, if they hit, it's like baseball. If you hit 300, you're probably phenomenal. Maybe there is almost an edge to like, we always maybe mock it to a degree of like, if you're moving up and have all that conviction, you should have your guy. Maybe we honestly should look at it and be like, if you're comfortable with one of the top guys, whoever that person may be, because you trust that it's more about their development and all. And I get, fit in an offense is a different thing, but maybe we also almost should view it that way, where it's like, just get in the dance and then just like hope that you can do the best job of developing that player. And you don't have to get a guy, or you don't have to get the guy, just get a guy that you can work with.
It's definitely an interesting concept. So I kind of like that 14-1 to go second overall, and you could get both Levis and Richardson there. Okay, let's transition from quarterback conversation a little bit. The Jets trade away Elijah Moore, goes to the Cleveland Browns. Brad, a team that we've talked about doing some nice things, thus far, aside from the Deshaun Watson thing, which is still a thing. But how did you talk through that trade and the value, and who you think kind of won that?
Yeah, we hated their offseason last offseason, but I think they might be having my favorite offseason of any team this offseason so far. And that was already kind of the case before they make this move for Elijah Moore. So what I really loved here was, and it ties into, I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah last year with the Detroit Lions trading for TJ Hawkinson, where the Vikings gave up a second and a third, but they got back 2 4th-round picks. And what happened here was the Jets sent Elijah Moore and a third, the 74th overall pick to be specific, for the 42nd overall pick from the Cleveland Browns. So you look at that and say, okay, on the Jimmy Johnson chart, it comes out to the Jets basically got the value of the 66th overall pick. They got a very early third rounder. And in my mind, I'm guessing the Jets said, we're not trading Elijah Moore going into the third year of his rookie deal, a former second-round pick. We're probably getting a third-round pick, absolute worst-case scenario. And the Browns, I think, smartly said, okay, we'll get them a second-round pick. So they actually, in their minds, are getting an earlier draft pick than they even want for this player. But we're going to get back a third. And like I said, per the Jimmy Johnson chart, the classic chart, it is the 66th overall pick. For the Fitzgerald Spielberger chart that we did over the cap, but also PFF and Ben Baldwin's and any others you want to look at, it's a 5th or 6th round pick. And look, you can maybe say, I don't buy that. I think it's you guys are your draft curve is too flat, whatever. Even if you take the average, what the Browns and the Vikings did, and obviously Kwesi was in Cleveland before going to Minnesota, was I think you're finding value and finding an edge in that you're dangling this carrot of the beautiful earlier round pick, but by getting back another pick and by leveraging the Jimmy Johnson chart, which some teams still, and I can tell you this for a fact, still use, you are manipulating their perception of the deal. I think it was a phenomenal trade for the Cleveland Browns. And then also from the football standpoint, I mean, they needed speed. They needed a slot player that could actually separate. Like Amari Cooper's great. Donovan Peoples-Jones is a good big body outside guy. Elijah Moore is exactly what they needed. And you get him for 2 years, about $3.4 million total over 2 years. I love this trade for Cleveland.
What do you think, Arjun?
Yeah, well, I think Brad hit the nail on the head. I think the old charts would probably say the Jets won that trade or got good value out of the trade, but the advanced maybe surplus value or the projection charts like the OTC draft charts will say that the Browns got good value. And I do think the Browns, on top of getting a really promising receiver on a cost-controlled contract, pretty much only costing them probably like a 5th or 6th round pick. I mean, that's really good value. And I think Brad kind of highlighted that he fits their offense really well. And I think we could see a shift in what the Browns are trying to do schematically. I know they've always been like a pretty run-heavy team, given how good their O-line is, given that they have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, but they might be shifting to more of a pass-heavy approach with, Deshaun Watson getting more reps, finally like getting more acclimated to being back in the NFL for a full season, and now having 3 reliable receivers on top of David Njoku. So I think it's a great trade for the Browns. It could be some underlying signals to how they're going to be playing in 2023.
Yeah, a guy who was number 20 on our big board in Elijah Moore when he came out. Going back on, by the way, I'm looking at his section in the draft guide, which if you're a PFF Plus subscriber, you not only get the 2023 draft guide, which, by the way, a new version just came out, combine data and more advanced PFF data as well, including situational grading. But you get access to all the ones previously as well. We had him, as a first round guy, quintessential slot receiver. I wouldn't put it past him to be productive on the outside, was what Mike had to write about him. Had nearly 4 yards per route run, which is an insane number. That was like 90th percentile. At a 90.4 grade versus man coverage. So, I mean, just his separation was really, really elite, only had 2 drops. So a guy that, look, it's not surprising to me that he didn't blossom with the Jets. Jets passing offense is a complete dumpster fire. And I think everyone believes that, that Garrett Wilson's really, really good. And that's why there was a glimmer of hope there. But I agree. I think it's a nice place to have some futures. If you do have the Browns, I think we talked about them a couple of times, and in the division, what did we get them at? I think initially like plus 475, something like that, Brett.
Right around there. Yeah.
Yes. I need to go take a look at where they are now, but I think that's interesting. And it begs the question that we talked about the Lamar situation a bunch. Cleveland is plus 430 right now, Baltimore 2-1. And the Bengals are plus 135. But you think about the Lamar situation, the word on the street is that he has a friend of his mother's reaching out to teams to inquire about their interest, which is not going super well and is not a very good look. So the murkiness with the Ravens and the Lamar Jackson situation continues. The Bengals are clearly should be the favorite, but I think the Browns you could look at them and you could say, on paper, they could be as talented, if not more talented than the Bengals, pending the quarterback situation. And, from a receiver perspective, yeah, certainly the Bengals have better receivers, no doubt about it. David Njoku, if Elijah Moore breaks out, like there are pathways there for it to be a compelling race. And obviously you're getting them at plus 430. So I think it's interesting. What does this do, if anything? And what do you know, Brad, about the rest of the receiver market? We talked about OBJ. We've talked about DeAndre Hopkins. Like, does this shed any light? And what do you have to tell us about those two?
It does. So I know the Jets signed Mecole Hardman today to a 1-year flyer, but I am still of the belief, especially if and when Aaron Rodgers becomes a New York Jet, that he is going to push pretty heavily for Odell Beckham Jr. to join him. So if there is a market out there for that, I think after Dallas moved on and went the Brandon Cooks route, and, Odell wasn't going to go to Cleveland. But again, it's another team that is not in the market anymore. I think it is more and more likely each passing day that he becomes a New York Jet. And so if you can bet that out there, I would look into it. And then the other one, DeAndre Hopkins, there is a market, I know, in Bovada, offshore book. I don't know if any other books have this, but you can bet on his next team. He posted, I think, an Instagram video today where the song Buffalo Soldier was playing. And so now everyone is saying, oh, it's him putting out some, hint that he's going to Buffalo. I don't think that is the case. My understanding is, the asking price right now is probably too much for them to be comfortable giving up at this moment. They obviously have, some good receivers already. They have a kind of a top-heavy roster to begin with. And as much as I agree it is a need, I think it would be more like an Elijah Moore type move for them as opposed to a big splash with DeAndre Hopkins. So to me, I've seen these markets. Again, I know it's not like a legit book onshore that you can bet, but I know the Giants traded for Darren Waller already. I think I saw last night they were plus 850 at Bovada. To me, I do not understand for the life of me, and hey, maybe I'm wrong, why we keep getting the connection of the New England Patriots and DeAndre Hopkins, because, their receivers are bad. Jacoby Myers not Jacoby Myers. Devontae Parker, I'm not comparing him to DeAndre Hopkins, but like he is that big body guy that can't really separate, but can go up and get it, make the jump ball plays. They traded for him a third, and him in a fifth, whatever. But also, Bill O'Brien and DeAndre Hopkins were not the best of friends, according to reports from many people. And I'm putting that very, very lightly when I say not the best of friends. So I don't understand, but I think there is value in taking some of the other teams on there, not the Patriots. I do not think the Bills might get steamed now, and I don't really see it for Buffalo either. Just one, I'm saying, I think Giants still kind of makes sense, but any other team as well, any dark horse you see in there, I think is a better bet right now.
The Giants make sense because of the Daniel Jones throw it up and pray way of playing quarterback, which is what you pay $40 million for.
Indubitably.
That's absolutely incredible. Arjun, any thoughts there about any of those guys? Anything to add?
I do think Odell to the Jets has some steam. It kind of makes sense from a schematic perspective. It would give the Jets a lot of flexibility with the receiver room where Wilson, Odell, and Hardman and Lazard could all play pretty much every position on the field. And it would give Rodgers a lot of weapons to work with. And I think it would make them a pretty scary offense. I'm not really as tuned in on the DeAndre Hopkins stuff as Brad is. So I think I'll let Brad kind of speak for himself. But I think his point about the Patriots is really smart. And I definitely wouldn't see Bill Belichick making that type of move.
It makes no sense to me. Either. I don't get it at all. But that's what happens during the off season. People lose their minds. Let's transition a little bit into more heavy draft props conversation. And let's start with this. You can get it, by the way, if you go to the our Discord. I posted it in there. Link is in the description. But Arjun, you did some more research on draft capital allocation. So essentially what you did is you looked at how much has each GM allocated within the top 100 picks to respective positions. I think you did this since, was it 2011?
Yeah.
So current CBA. Tell us, first off, everyone should go check this out. It's really informative. But what were kind of the big takeaways that you got from doing that research?
Yeah, so a lot of it did come from some of our conversations on the pod talking about why isn't Howie going to select Bijan Robinson? It's because he doesn't select running backs within the top 100 picks. And the 10 years he's been kind of the GM, or at least with the Eagles, he's selected one running back in the top 100, and that's been Miles Sanders. So I don't necessarily think that, the Eagles are a great spot for, Miles Sanders to land. Just in general, though, I think as some of these teams to select what position with their first pick odds hopefully come out, there is value in like understanding that GMs will pick based on their past, or like what they've done in the past, not necessarily like what is best for the roster. Like some GMs will prioritize premium positions like receiver, tight end, edge. Like for example, like John Lynch has selected receiver in the top 100 with 23.5% of his top 100 picks, edge with 17.5% of his top 100 picks. So you can see like he definitely prioritizes some of these premium positions more than non-premium positions. Even though like running back and linebacker show up a little bit high. So I think it's a good table to kind of like understand where GMs like to allocate some of their resources. And I capped it off at the top 100 picks within top 100 just because, some GMs like Les Snead trade away a lot of top 100 picks in the first round. So you don't want to just limit it to first round. And you also want to like look at the second round for teams that are finally picking in the first round, but maybe haven't in years prior.
I think it was great to go top 100 in both directions. I think A, not to just do first, and also B, to, I think by day 3, you're kind of just taking flyers and like seeing if you can just shoot the moon with some like tradesy, toolsy prospects. Like the one cool thing here, the takeaway for me is you can look both directions of, okay, have they been heavy on this position and are they going to continue that? Or have they neglected one, but they need to do it? Like they have a need there. So maybe now they're going to go that way. And so you have to do some roster research. One example that jumps out to me is, I think it goes both directions. So Brett Veach with the Kansas City Chiefs, 20% of his top 100 picks have been at the edge. I know George Karlaftis was just last year in the first round, but you lose Frank Clark in free agency. To me, in that defense, Charles Omenihu was kind of more of an interior defensive line signing. I'm sure he'll play outside, but they take kind of a stand-up outside linebacker types. They'll put their hand in the dirt, but I just kind of view him as a guy who's going to play more as like a 5 technique and kick inside a little bit as well. Edge makes a lot of sense to me there. I think there's going to be some players. Was it Felix Anudike-Uzomah from Kansas State is one name. You see some guys in mocks. We always have that, right? The Joe Tryon, Shoyinka, like those guys that are, again, good athletes, good players, maybe not as developed as you'd like to see. Or he had 0% of his top 100 picks on the interior of the defensive line. They lose Kalen Saunders to the New Orleans Saints. They need some help there. Obviously, Chris Jones going into the final year of his contract. So either way, I like defensive line a lot, I think, for the Kansas City Chiefs.
It's an interesting point. This was going to be my question to you as well, Arjun, is think someone in the Discord actually mentioned an analogous question, which is like, are GMs more likely to attack an area of need or an area that they were bad at that they maybe haven't addressed in free agency? There's a lot that you'd have to unpack there to kind of accurately measure that. But I think the question around what Brad is saying is an interesting one, which is, controlling for what they did last year. Does that have any impact? And I think, your gut would tell you, yes, maybe it should, that, a guy wouldn't take another edge defender there. But there's so many other variables at play that I wonder if that would wash out. And I'm just curious if you looked into that at all and what your inclination would be.
Yeah, it's a great point, and that's definitely why, Chiefs selecting edge last year, they might not do it this year, but we've seen GMs do it. I mean, Howie Roseman went Devontae Smith 1 year after he took Jalen Reagor. It's not completely out of the ordinary, and especially for premium positions, it doesn't help to get young guys on cost-controlled contracts. If a team selects a linebacker, that might be a different story, that they probably won't select another linebacker in back-to-back years just because linebackers have a tough transition from college to the NFL, and you probably want to pair a young guy with a veteran guy who has at least 2 or 3 years of experience instead of just a guy coming off his rookie year. So I think there are cases where even though a team selects a position in year N, they could select that position again in year N plus 1. So I think it does depend on what position it is, and I think I would prioritize the 5 non-QB premium positions, which would be receiver, edge, tackle, interior D-line, and corner. So I could see teams reloading in back-to-back years, but for other positions like tight end or guard or safety or like linebacker, I don't necessarily see that being a thing.
I think that's a good point, right? Like you always need good players at those premium positions. I was thinking about different ways to leverage this, and I'm very curious to hear, obviously, what you guys are thinking. One that came to mind for me is as the draft is going, I think there's a lot of opportunity to, we talk about live betting games a lot, but live betting the draft to me, I think is a really exciting one. And even just thinking about after round one, we have a lot of information about teams and looking at who they've chosen. And often you've got, next player drafted, but next player drafted for certain teams or certain team to select this player. And a lot of that is just driven by, the hype machine, right? It's just like, yeah, they need this guy, or this guy's high on a lot of people's lists or whatever. And I think this could be a really interesting way of playing that second round, that third round. As you get in, it's still in the top 100, right? The data is still relevant, but there's just going to be less understanding in the market, right? People, it's going to be sharp, duller markets, I should say. But what do you guys think? How else would you play it?
I think that's one great way. There is a lot usually of going into day two. You can bet like a team in position. It's a little bit less of like the over-unders, and the books get a little bit scared. Some things kind of leak about the first 5 or 6 picks going into that day, but you definitely can bet on position. And one that I loved, and ties back to Arjun's chart again. And also I had to go Google it myself, and you sent it this morning in Slack. So Martin Mayhew, who is the Washington Commanders general manager. We already talked about him before. Also, Marty Herney is kind of like a pseudo GM as well. But Martin Mayhew, who on there is, I think, 5th among GMs in investment of top 100 picks on running backs. That does not include, the list does not include his tenure as the Lions general manager from 2008 to 2015. He selected running back in the top 100 in 2008, 2010, 2011, 2000, and 2015. So he did it like half the years he was there. And then he was in the Niners from 17 to 20. As George knows, they used a bunch of 3rd and 4th round picks on running backs every single time. They would trade up for the guys. Kyle Shanahan would kick him off the team by training camp. So he's obsessed. And then in Washington, they've obviously have Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson. We mentioned him with respect to Bijan Robinson at 16. It is not an accident that Bijan Robinson's over-under offshore is 16.5. I think that's by design. But if they don't go that route in round one, going into day two, if there's like what position will the Washington Commanders select on day two, sitting right in the middle of that second round? There's all these names kind of floating around of good players, or even in the third round. I would love a running back to Washington in the second or third round.
Yeah, I'm with you, Brad. I'm a big fan of that. Just looking at Jahmyr Gibbs, who could be a second round guy. He's right now 40-1 to be selected by the Commanders. I don't necessarily see him going in the first round. I think that's, even Bijan, like we don't even know where he's going to go. So if you are looking for like a super long shot flyer, I kind of like the Commanders to select Jahmyr Gibbs at 40-1. I wouldn't even be surprised if like Washington trades up to go get Jahmyr Gibbs or something, and some maybe sharper team takes advantage of them in that situation.
Yeah, that's the Commanders taking a running back makes a lot of sense. Interesting looking at some of the guys with more larger sample size. I just think it's so funny to see the GM for some of these teams. So Mike Brown, Bengals, Jerry Jones for the Cowboys. It's so perfect. It's 100% correct and true, and really kind of funny. The Cowboys have allocated a top 100 pick to a running back just twice out of the 36 picks. So kind of middle of the pack there at 5.5%. Interestingly, some other ones that have done so frequently, Les Snead of the Rams, Jason Licht, Light, of the Buccaneers, Brandon Beane, interestingly, of the Bills. So some other ones that are in there for the running back conversation. And I think the second round is where you take advantage of that. But Bijan, I think, is probably the only guy in the first. I'm not sure those teams are taking him in the first round, aside from maybe the Cowboys. Let's talk a little bit about just draft props in general. I think you had a couple, Brad, that you were feeling good about.
Yeah, there's one I really like at this point, and I think it's going to continue to get decent value with a lot of mock drafts going on. And that is, and I've seen it kind of across the board. Again, I'm mentioning Bovada because I saw it last night, where it's actually the worst value compared to. I was looking at former PFF contributor Kent Wayrock has this cool app website where you can look at all the various mock draft or all the various draft props, excuse me. And that is Paris Johnson, the tackle for the Ohio State Buckeyes, to be the first offensive lineman selected. So look, Peter Skoronski is going to be before him in pretty much every mock you see, or he already has been. He is a phenomenal player. There is no question about it. His arms are sub 33 inches, which is historically a threshold where a lot of NFL people tell you cannot play tackle. I know it sounds silly and it's some random arbitrary number, but you know what? It exists, and we're trying to figure out what they're going to do, not what we think matters. So he still probably could be an all-pro guard or a very good player at guard. Obviously, there are the Quentin Nelsons of the world, but the buzz on him is nowhere near like a Quentin Nelson level buzz. And I think even a guy like an Elijah Vera Tucker probably had more buzz going into that draft when the Jets traded up for him, but a couple of pure tackles, that had the size, that could play left, all that went before him. So for me, Paris Johnson, the dude has 36.5-inch arms. He's a freak physically. He's also a very good athlete, can get to the second level. And the last little tidbit, and this is a little conspiracy theory, but I'm going to go with it. So the second biggest contingency in Columbus, Ohio today behind the Carolina Panthers was the Chicago Bears. And what I found very interesting today was there was videos of Paris Johnson doing pass sets and doing his, kick slide and all that stuff as a right tackle. He was doing it on the right side with the footwork of someone who plays on the right side. The Bears need a right tackle. They have a starting left tackle in Braxton Jones. I mean, maybe they move the guys around, but I found that interesting. I couldn't find a Bears personnel person who was watching that or making him do it, but I found it interesting nonetheless. But all jokes aside, we know that Justin Fields is part of their process. They've said it publicly. We asked Justin his opinion. He was in the draft room last year, which I think is kind of crazy. Not crazy, but like it's not common. I'll tell you that much. Former teammate in Paris Johnson. Like I said, really, really good player, good measurables, all the yada yada, the intangibles, all Big Ten academics, all those things. Like a phenomenal person and player. You can get him at plus 150 according to Kent's tool. I would bet him plus 150 right now to be the first offensive lineman taken.
Wow. Love that. Any others on your radar, Arjun?
Not right now. There honestly just hasn't been enough movement to justify any other.
It's like, what are we doing here? Can we put some phone calls to these sports books and like get some draft props out there? They're scared. They're scared.
They're afraid to compete.
They're scared of the printing press. That makes sense, right? They they didn't want to make their Equay, and that's their loss. Actually, it's really our loss. Hopefully we'll get some soon. Other bets that are worth talking about are Fairleigh Dickinson. I don't even know what their names are, but they not only covered 15.5, they almost won the damn game. And maybe should have. But we've got some games coming up Thursday, starting Thursday, and then Friday, obviously, as well. I'll just throw this one out there. I have Houston winning the whole thing. They are 7.5-point favorites to a spunky Miami team. I don't think that Houston's best player is 100% or potentially even close to 100%. Is it Marcus? It's Sasser. I can't remember what it is. Is it Marcus? I'm not sure.
Something like that. Yeah.
Anyways, he's not 100%. He had I think it was a hamstring pull. So and the Miami guards are good. So, I think, could he re-injure it? If so, they certainly have a chance. But even with him not 100%, I think they have a legit shot to win. And you have as well on your side the fact that I have picked them to win the whole thing in one of my brackets. And if you want to know why that matters, because in the other one I had Arizona. So do with that what you will. But some of the other lines here: Princeton is a 9.5-point underdog to Creighton. Texas 4.5-point favorites over Xavier. Bama is also 7.5-point favorite. They play 5th seed SDSU. Gonzaga UCLA should be a good game. UCLA is a 1.5-point favorite over the Fighting Drew Timmies. Tennessee -4.5 over Florida Atlantic. UConn -4.5 over Arkansas, and Kansas State, despite being a 3 seed, It's actually an underdog to Tom Izzo and MSU. I think that one is kind of interesting. No one knows anything about K-State. They don't know who their coach is. They don't know who their players are. And so that'd be another one that's interesting. Any thoughts, Brad or Arjun, on these games?
Yeah, I have one that I like a lot also. I think it was funny, you just mentioned Kansas State and the players. I think his name is Marquise Noel, he's very short. I mean, he was awesome against Kentucky, but then John Calipari called him like a little kid or something and then had to apologize the next day. I mean, look, he dropped like 25 in your face, so call him whatever you want. But one that I really like is, and yes, there's kind of a narrative associated here, but the officiating and some of those angles have been huge so far in March Madness. So Tennessee played Duke, and it looked like they were playing like rugby on the basketball court. It was not even basketball, and a lot of people complained about it. There's a lot of conversation about it. The Florida Atlantic coach, they asked him how he's going to prepare for the Tennessee game, and he said, "I'm going to go watch some Australian rules rugby film to get ready for this game." And so here's what I like: the over/under there is 129.5. Now Tennessee usually does slow the pace down. They are a good defensive team. Rick Barnes coaches his guys to obviously be physical and all these things, but I think it's one of two ways. Either A, Tennessee tries to be less physical and not be as, bully ball because they're afraid of fouls, which can lead to scoring, or the officiating is going to be very, very tight, and we get a lot of foul shots. We get in the bonus early because of, the coach basically saying, "Hey, I'm not going to talk. I'm going to complain if there's a lot of fouls." So I like the over there. Florida Atlantic and FDU, it was, I think it was 78-70 was the final score. Different matchup and different teams, but I like the over in that matchup because of kind of some of the narrative, but also, just two teams that I think can score as well, especially if the officiating is advocating for it.
129.5 is what I see for FAU Tennessee. Arjun, we're getting you on board with Formula One. Will you deign to watch any college basketball?
I watched a little bit of college basketball in the last couple of days. But yeah, I mean, the only one I really paid attention to a lot was the FDU FAU game because we were riding FDU's plus 16.5, which it looked dead in the water right off the bat, and then they made that huge run.
I know.
So thankfully they covered for us, but I mean, I think I'll be a little bit busy this weekend with being back in my hometown, so I don't know if I'll be able to watch that much college basketball or enough to care to really bet on anything. So might be a pass this week, but we'll definitely be betting on it as soon as some of the final rounds come around.
Yeah, and you're in California, which is a desert for people that like to bet on sports. So my apologies. That was our podcast. We'll be back on Sunday evening. Go make sure you join the printing press. Oh, and by the way, forecast, promo code forecast on pff.com. Get all of the great content from both Arjun and Brad. The free agency deal grader is still live, team by team grades as well. And of course, the draft guide and PFF's mock draft sim, all available for you on pff.com and PFF app. Love y'all. Peace.